I like that. I'm Nicole Rycroft. I'm the founder and executive director of Canopy. Just a quick check. Do we have any history buffs in the room? Self-proclaimed, vaguely interested history geeks. Okay, I'll assume that some of you are closet history buffs. Indulge me with this little rollback in history and time. Back to 1905, which is when the Henry Ford was rolling the first Model T off the production rank. And at that very same time, brilliant chemists in the UK were turning wood pulp into a new silky textile that is known today as viscose. It was a remarkable breakthrough at the time, a whole new type of textile. And I think one of the things that I find really remarkable is the fact that even though we have modernized almost every other aspect of society, communications, medicine, energy, transportation, we are still making materials like viscose, like paper, like packaging, in exactly the same way as we were back at the turn of the 19th century. We are still extracting in a linear and kind of like take, make, waste production system, forests and turning them into kind of products that are part of modern day society. And this take, make, waste production system essentially assumes that we can take endlessly from nature and waste freely. And that assumption has us on a collision course, as we all know, with the natural world. And so the next frontier in terms of carbon-intensive sector transformation isn't just in energy. And as the next panel will explore, it's in construction, it's in steel, and it is also in materials like pulp, paper, and viscose textiles. And together, these materials drive almost a third of greenhouse gas emissions, and yet currently, they're only receiving 3% of impact investment. It's a huge mismatch in terms of impact and market opportunity. It's a blind spot for investors. It's also an incredible opportunity, and I think Michael spoke to that quite eloquently in terms of as investors become aware of new sectors, build their confidence, therefore they're able to move into them and deploy more effectively. And this sector in the material space has incredible potential, not just because of the climate benefits, the nature benefits, the financial returns, but the fact that it builds resiliency through numerous value chains, from agriculture to waste management to retail, food and beverage, and fashion. And so for the last 25 years, that's what I've been focused on at Canopy, is transforming these entire supply chains out of being forest dependent and onto more circular production systems. We greened the Harry Potter book series, and then with that, global publishing. We work with more than 1,000 brands, to Mark's point, to build the right market pull-through so that we can incentivize a change in business as usual. And so we work with brands from H&M and LVMH to Walmart, so pace setters as well as gatekeepers of industry representing $2 trillion, all of whom are looking for low impact, traceable materials as they move forward into the 21st century and building resiliency into their own business production models. And so we work to build market leverage, we work to mobilize the scale of investment and back innovators and conventional producers to diversify the fiber basket, because the goal is not incremental change, it's about rewiring the materials system of the global economy so that forest conservation and industrial resilience move forward hand in hand. So the imperative for this transformation is very pragmatic. Continuing to rely almost exclusively on forests is inherently a risky business. We are seeing an incredible upkick in forest fires here in Brazil. There is absolute knowledge that that is a proof point. The projections are that between now and 2030, there will be an additional 14% increase in the frequency and intensity of forest fires. So it's literally a fiber basket that's going up in smoke. What that's also leading to is a constriction of supply. We have increased competition from other sectors. We have regulations actually closing down value-added markets to non-sustainable wood products. And so the projection for pricing is that there's going to be significant price hikes over the next 20 years. In fact, 112% is the conservative estimate. And so if wood is becoming increasingly volatile to rely on as a fiber source, what are the alternatives? Well, the good news is that they are bountiful because essentially viscose textiles, paper, and packaging are all made from cellulose. And you don't need to cut down forests to find cellulose. It's found in the 500 million tons of cellulose, of agricultural residues that are burnt every year after the food grain harvest. It's in the 100 billion items of clothing that are produced every year. 60% of it's in landfill within 12 months. And so these low-impact inputs actually are commercially viable alternatives to forest fiber, and they also carry significant environmental benefits to them, as well as financial benefits in that these technologies using these inputs use 90% less water, up to 90% less water, significantly less energy and less chemicals. So the OPEX is lower along with the CAPEX. Good news is this shift is already underway. We're seeing the rewiring of the system. Brands are building into their contracts, into their policy commitments, next-gen commitments and requirements. We're seeing policymakers put in place deforestation legislation and restricting market access with disclosure requirements. On the production side, the first next-gen production lines are actually at commercial scale, and we see conventional producers in China now starting to add their own circular next-gen production facilities. And so the market signal is real and actually really shifting fast. Obviously, as with renewables, multiple social and strategic trade positioning benefits for the countries and the regions that are first movers. And we're seeing China and India moving quickly, and obviously significant opportunity for countries like Brazil as well. And the same market forces that help drive the change in renewables and the transition of fossil fuel-based production to renewable energy production are at play in the fiber space. And so as renewables are to fossil fuels, next-gen materials are to forest conservation. We see the right market dynamics, enabling policy. Investment is only just now starting to shift, and with that there's incredible opportunity. And so every industrial revolution up until now has been defined by what it created. And this industrial revolution of the material space will not only be known by what it created, but also what it helped stop the destruction of. Nature loss is a side effect of this value chain currently, but it's no longer a side issue. It's a material risk as we move forward. And as we have often been told, supply chains change slowly over decades. At Canopy, our experience is that they are changing within sort of a matter of 5 to 6 years. And so with the right conditions in the material space, and I'm sure we'll hear similarly from the panelists that are coming up, these supply chains that have been out of out of sight and not a focus for decarbonisation and for transition are actually moving very quickly. And so I think more, which for investors means that there's just more opportunities to be deploying capital to good effect. And so now the issue is really around how do we accelerate that transition. With that, I think I'll hand over to my learned colleagues that are going to be part of the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Wonderful insights, amazing work that you're doing, and just giving us a sense of the future. This is the future of the world. Sustainability at heart. Great. Our next panel is Rewiring Industry, Decarbonizing Heavy Sectors at Scale. And to facilitate this, we have Stephen Kukoda from the International Copper Association, which I must also mention is a proud partner of the World Climate Foundation, and they are leading in our mining coalition. Welcome, Stephen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction, and congratulations again to World Climate Foundation for putting on an outstanding event at COP, and thanks to Jan Nielsen and the team. Yeah, so I'm with the International Copper Association. I'm Executive Vice President for Membership and Partnerships. I'm usually sitting in one of these chairs and getting the tough questions, so it's a bit of a relief that I get to stand and sit a bit to the side and ask the questions. So I'll invite the panelists to the stage and to take their seats, please, while I just provide a little bit of opening context. And thanks to Nicole for working in at the end of her discussion the theme of rewiring industry, which is what we're talking about here, and decarbonizing heavy sectors at scale. Panelists, please, come on up. So, hard-to-abate sectors like steel, cement, aluminium, and mining more broadly are proving that they can make material progress towards net zero sooner rather than later. And we can attribute that to a degree to technological innovation. So things like hydrogen-based smelting and renewable electrification, carbon capture, utilization, and storage. They're definitely revolutionizing the way we produce important materials, but at the same time, I think we're also seeing a new industrial symbiosis between industry, investors, and governments that's transforming pilot projects into large-scale initiatives, and that's also changing competitiveness and industrial strategy for a decarbonized future. I think at the end, what we're saying here too is that we're moving from a fossil fuel-intensive world to a material-intensive economy, and we're talking about the building blocks that are required not just for decarbonization, but for the mega trends more broadly. If you're talking about urbanization or the proliferation of artificial intelligence and data centers, a growing middle class, all of this is going to require more and more materials, not less materials, but at the same time, these are hard to abate sectors that have to produce more and decarbonize at the same time. So we'll keep that as a backdrop. Right. I'll get to the panel in a second, right? Just some maybe final remarks to set the stage. So, you know, here at COP30, we're at a critical moment for industrial decarbonization, signaling that even hard-to-abate sectors can change. But to hit global targets, these solutions must now scale across markets, supply chains, and geographies. And I think that's just a long-winded way of saying we have to go farther and faster. So with that, I'll take a seat. I'll just give you the names and the organizations for the panelists, and I'll ask each of you to introduce yourselves and your organizations a little bit more, and then maybe give us a couple of sentences about why you're here at COP and any reflections that you might have at this point, okay? So I have with me Patricia Allen. She's the co-founder of Aya Earth Partners. Welcome, Patricia. We have a change to the panel. I'm not sure. Oh, good, we have the change on the screen. Outstanding, right? So we have Leonardo Neves, who is with Norsk Hydro. Welcome, Leonardo. And then last but not least, Rodrigo Lauria, who's the Director of Climate Change and Carbon at Vale. Disclosure, Vale Base Metals is a member of the International Copper Association. Not Vale, but I thought I would be responsible just to mention the affiliation. So, Why don't you begin, if you would, Patricia?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I would like to thank Flora and Jens for the invitation, congratulate the World Climate Foundation for all the work you've been doing to mobilize both private, public, and civil society sectors together. I really appreciate that you're also connecting the so-called Global North and the Global South. Very important to have a COP happening in Brazil and especially in Belém, in a nature-based region. The work that we do at II means ancestral spirit in Quechua. It's one of the oldest languages in the region of the Amazon, and also is also ancestral meaning in the African region that connects to a type of a plant that's one of the most resilient plants in Africa. So it's a good reminder that in order to make things more balanced, we need to create a new economic development model that's nature positive, that's net positive. It means that it prospers to people, planet, and businesses. So both at IA and today I'm also the president at Systemic in Latin America. Systemic is also trying to connect public, private, and social sector together in this decarbonization, nature-based solutions to prove that's possible to ignite growth with green approaches. So super quickly, I think in the previous panel, my partner Mark also described a little bit about the Industry Transition Accelerator, but I will just describe why decarbonizing heavy sectors is so important to us, not only globally, but also a big opportunity for Brazil. So today we have 7 major sectors that are the heavy emitters. We have one of the global coalitions that was nested at Systemic called Mission Possible Partnerships, where we are tracking all the sectors and proving that you can decarbonize at scale so that we could still aim to achieve the Mission 1.5. Unfortunately, we are quite off track now, and we are engaging also in adaptation journey. But in these sectors, we have major opportunities. One of them, as an example, is the aviation sector. Another example is the maritime sector. And in their case, Brazil could be a major supplier of clean energy sources that would reduce the emissions of those sectors, not only locally in Brazil, but globally. So taking the aviation sector as one of the case examples, we could be reducing the emissions of the sector, and Brazil could alone supply almost 30% of the global needs of sustainable aviation fuels. But for that to happen, we need to become a major supplier of those fuels, and we are not yet. So concretely, what we've been doing, both through Systemic and IA, is engage the private sector community to work together with the Ministry of Finance for the last 3 years to promote what we call the ecological transformation plan. With that, we proved that we can double the GDP growth, and not a coincidence that BioSAF alone can add between $40 and $75 billion to the economy per year. So I gave a description of what I do conceptually, but also in practice, and I hope we can work more closely together and finish this COP with important announcements on investments and private sector investing in Brazil in those sectors. Because today, only 2% of the private sector investments in the world come to emerging economies. So the opportunity is huge, both to decarbonize and also to create, to drive prosperity, but the numbers today are still very low.
No, thank you for those opening remarks. Leonardo, please, and introduce yourself.
Okay, if you could speak in Portuguese, I wait for the translation, okay?
Good afternoon, all. My name is Leonardo Neves. I'm a representative of Hydro, representative for the ESG and environment sector. Hydro is a 19-year-old company with over 32,000 employees in 42 countries. Our core business is energy and aluminum. We believe that aluminum, low carbon aluminum, is a huge pillar for the energy transition. And I will briefly go over through our decarbonization plan throughout our entire chain, including the processing of alumina, the primary aluminum, and extrusion, and I will also talk about our decarbonization plan. We have invested in the last few years about 12.6 billion reais in the decarbonization plan. This is a current reality. We have reached the 2030 goals in Brazil with this plan. So it's very timely because our bauxite and alumina production chain and part of the smelters are located in the state of Pará. So we have really invested in decarbonization and obviously in a just transition, seeking throughout technology to minimize environmental impacts, the footprint of our operations. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Thank you.
I think you're in a unique position in your organization that you bring a value chain perspective to this discussion. So in the next go-around, I want you to start thinking about how we can bring that into the discussion.
Com certeza.
Of course, the hydro strategy is geared to low carbon aluminum. And in order for that to become a reality, we have been working in low carbon products. I commented with Stephen that a net zero world needs net zero materials. So the huge possibility of hydro in the aluminum chain is the fact that we dominate the entire chain. And it's fundamental for the customers that acquire our aluminum, both primary aluminum and the extrusion pieces for the automobile sector. It is fundamental that the traceability of this entire decarbonization process is demonstrated, certified. So hydro has a lot of competitive potential and has proven this to its main customers through its projects, not only connected to primary metal, but also recycling. In the last few years, we have really invested on recycling, be it in Europe or in the US, even though we have many challenges to produce aluminum through recycling. But currently we have two main products. Circal, which is a product connected to the recycling chain. It's a product that's basically zero emissions, and Reduxa, which is a product made from primary metal, and it is one of the most competitive products globally. So that is our position, and of course our strategy is producing aluminum through renewable energy. And like I said, it is a company that has existed for 119 years, and ever since its beginning, we have been producing through energy derived from hydro power plants, and now currently in Brazil, out of these 12.6 billion investments, a good part of that investment refers to the implementation of joint ventures that are wind farms and solar parks that can subsidize the production of alumina here in Brazil.
Really have taken and need to use this in my own discussions here at COP. Net zero growth needs net zero materials. I think it's a mantra that we can all get behind. Rodrigo, please, the floor is yours.
So first of all, thank you for having me here. It's a real pleasure to share this panel with friends. For those who don't know, Vale is a mining company here in Brazil. We also operate in other countries, but most of our production comes from Brazil. Indeed, it comes from the Amazon region. We are in the region for a long time, and now we help to protect something around 800,000 hectares only 2 to 3% of this area is the area that we explore. And this area comes around 6% of our productions. So we are proud to be here, participating in the COP, showing that it's possible to conciliate economic development with nature and environment. As for that, I'll be brief because we have a lot to discuss here, but I think today it's a day that we need to celebrate. We did it. We have been engaging with a lot of different stakeholders throughout the year, from the COP presidency, government, private sector, entities, public, civil society, and now we are here to discuss and maybe to start a new era of the role of private sector in implementing things, as Patricia just said. So it's an amazing opportunity to put things in place. I'll stop here.
No, excellent, Rodrigo. Look, I know Vale has a big role to play here at COP, and I know you personally also are quite busy, so thank you for taking the time to be part of this panel. I'm going to take some moderator's privilege in how I approach this, but I could use some clarification from the organizers. It seems like the clock was half of the time we were expecting. Am I adhering directly to that? That's fine. Okay, all right, so this is what we're going to do. I'm going to go directly to the second question for each of you, because I think that there may be more, not necessarily more interesting, but more specific to each of your organizations. And if I could ask you to take only about 2 minutes for each one. Rodrigo, then let me come back to you. Look, you know, Vale's been leading the way in integrating renewable and low carbon technologies into mining. Okay? So if you can help us understand, what are maybe some of the critical success factors that have enabled Vale to progress industrial carbonization at this level? And then do you see a way that these models can be scaled up across other resource-intensive industries around the world? So, you know, how do we take best practices so that we can accelerate this transition?
Yeah, it's a maybe $1 billion question, because everybody's seeking for this scale and efficiency. But in the end of the day, I think our strategy is pretty simple. We are partnering with clients. We are aiming to achieve the best solution for these clients, and also producing products that fits with the clients. So the first thing here is to be connected with the client, what is the needs and how we can provide the best solution for them. Have said that, I like to think in this environment as a puzzle. You have the different pieces moving around, all of them are there, but they are not exactly connected. For instance, we have carbon markets, but they are not regulated yet globally. You have the financing mechanisms, but as Patricia said, you need to improve the quantity, the total amount engaged, and so on. And again, you have a lot of different stuff. So the way that we're doing things, we are partnering. We develop a product that can help our clients to decarbonize. Just to give you some color on this, the briquettes is a technology after 20 years of R&D that helps the clients, the steel-making producers, to reduce up to 10% in the blast furnace, but at the same time, reduce up to 80% in our emissions, because use less energy, materials, and so on. So this is the mindset. Identify a practical and pragmatic solution, test within the clients, and then scale. And to scale, for sure, we need all these conditions. We must comply with all these conditions. So I think basically that's it.
No, it is an all of the above approach. I understand that. The clock has moved again, so 1.5 minutes from each of our next two. Okay, and Leonardo, you've already started to answer this question, so maybe it's a little easier. You've already spoken about how Norsk Hydro is a global leader in developing low carbon aluminum. You talked about the value chain perspective. But now also continuing on this theme of scaling things up. Okay? You know, from your perspective, what's the most critical next step in achieving that scale more broadly across your industry, keeping competitiveness in mind? I understand that, right? Is it technological? Is it financial? Is it regulatory environment? What is it?
Well, that's another million-dollar question. And actually, the biggest challenge for the aluminum sector currently is being able to capture, from a financial trade-off standpoint, how much is it still worth it to invest in decarbonization if compared to what the customers or what society wants to pay to fund the decarbonization. All of these investments that I mentioned and our history at Hydro led us to this first quarter in terms of energy efficiency. We're probably the refinery that is located about an hour from this location, and it is the third refinery in low carbon emissions per ton. So we were able to advance in terms of decarbonizing products, both extrusion and primary products. In the automobile industry or in the construction industry or in other industries connected to food. But the payment for the green premium, the net zero product, is still a challenge, getting the customer to want to pay that premium. But we really believe that it is possible.
You bring up a good point, and the speaker earlier from ITA also talked about the green premium. Look, there are market forces at play here that are also affecting how quickly we can scale here, right? So thank you for bringing that important point to the discussion. And Patricia, for Aya Earth Partners, business plus innovation plus sustainability is the only way to speed up Brazil's green industrial revolution, right? How can P3 products like the one you envision drive investment, technology, talent to make heavy industries in Brazil deliverables for COP, not just deliverables, but successes, right? I'm struggling with my own words here, you know. But ideally, how do you then serve as a market for other, as a model for other emerging markets?
Well, I think Brazil needs to give us the example in a few things. This COP is very important to us because we are discussing financial mechanisms to drive this change. So the road from Baku to Belém, we started a discussion on how to mobilize 1.3 trillion for climate finance. Then we have another 300 billion for climate adaptation. I think yesterday was a very important day where the countries agreed to triple the investments in adaptation. And also we had many important countries getting together to foster the advancement of the transition away from fossil fuels. And finally, one thing that I've been personally pushing for the last 3 years, yesterday I think was a very important day for us on the action agenda, because the only new initiative that the COP presidency allowed us to bring to the table was on green skills. And I think that was very symbolic. So skills for the new economy was a very important signal to the world that this agenda is not only an agenda for economic growth, but is also an agenda for people, for just transition. So I would say we are already sending a good signal to the world. Now we need to focus on translating what was put in the list for negotiation into action and guaranteeing that by the end of next week, we'll be celebrating the results and a very clear plan to implement all those actions for the next couple of years.
I think very good closing remarks there. Look, I hope that this was an abbreviated panel, right? But I hope you at least got a sense of the not just the commitment, but the real successes that we're starting to see in these heavy industries, the hard to abate sectors, and then this, you know, this recognition and willingness to go farther, faster, to scale up these projects. Brazil and other parts of the world. So thank you to the panelists for a short but interesting and informative discussion.
Thank you.
Stephen, thank you very much to you and your phenomenal panelists. You did a great job. And just a little shout out to Aya,